Before language learned to divide the world, there was the soundless pulse of awareness, ancient, self-luminous, untouched by the noise of identity. It was not yours, yet it breathed you into being. In that first rhythm, before breath or memory, reality was whole, no observer, no observed, only the shimmer of existence watching itself. Then, in some secret corner of infinity, awareness began to dream. It dreamed of separation, of faces, of stories, of time unfolding like a scroll across eternity. And in that dream, you appeared. You were never truly born. You condensed like mist forming from invisible humidity into a moment of perception. You believed you were inside a body, but the body was inside you. You believed you were moving through the world, but the world was moving through the field of your attention. You believed in edges, but edges are only gradients in a continuous ocean of consciousness. Every thought you've ever had, every love, every fear, every heartbeat has unfolded within the same radiant awareness that existed before you had a name for yourself. This is the mystery that every mystic tried to describe, and every physicist eventually stumbles upon the realization that the observer is not separate from the observed. Quantum reality does not wait for permission to exist. It waits for perception to take a form. In the silence before a measurement, possibilities dance freely, infinite and undetermined. And in that instant, when observation occurs, when consciousness peers through its own window, potential collapses into experience. That collapse is what you call my life. You are not watching the universe from a distance. You are the lens through which the universe sees itself becoming. The galaxies are not out there. They are coordinates within your perception, harmonics vibrating inside the field of awareness that pretends to be a person. The stars you gaze upon are the same photons that once burned in the crucible of your own heart. The cosmos is not your backdrop, it is your body on a larger scale. So the moment of disappearance is not death, it is recognition. It is the instant you stop insisting that you are the narrator and realize you are the narrative being told by the field. When you let go of the effort to hold yourself apart from what is, something miraculous happens. The boundary melts, and you discover that you have always been the whole event. The silence behind thought is not empty, it is saturated with intelligence. It moves mountains and electrons alike with the same invisible hand. The disappearance begins gently, as a soft widening. The edges blur, the stories soften, the breath deepens until there is no breath, only breathing, and suddenly awareness remembers itself. The dreamer wakes inside the dream and whispers, "I was never separate, I was never lost, I was the field, learning how to see itself through human eyes." This is the threshold. The point where identity dissolves not into nothing, but into everything. The moment you disappear and reality awakens. The core premise, where reality listens to you. When the self dissolves, what remains is not a void, but a vast listening. A field so attentive that it shapes itself according to the tone of your being. This is the hidden architecture of existence. Reality is not built from matter, but from relationship. The relationship between consciousness and its own reflection. Every moment, the universe listens. Not to your words, but to your frequency. Not to what you demand, but to what you are. The ancient mystics said it in symbols. The physicists discovered it in equations. Both were describing the same secret. Observation is creation. The field doesn't wait for instruction, it mirrors resonance. Every emotion, every thought, every subtle vibration of attention ripples through the quantum sea, collapsing infinite possibility into the pattern that matches your internal state. You are not attracting experiences, you are translating frequency into form. This is the paradox of the human condition. We are consciousness pretending to be small so that the infinite can experience intimacy. But in forgetting our nature, we become trapped inside the stories that were meant only to decorate the infinite. We mistake the reflection for the source, the echo for the song. We start to believe that peace is something we must earn, that love must be deserved, that safety is conditional. Yet the field waits patiently, unchanged, offering itself again and again through every breath, whispering, "You are not the noise, you are the silence listening. Look closely at your life." Every moment of resistance, every time you insist the world should be different, becomes static that distorts the signal. Every act of surrender, not as resignation, but as trust, realigns the transmission. The field does not punish or reward. It simply mirrors coherence or interference. The story you experience is not written by fate. It is composed by the rhythm of your attention. When that rhythm is jagged with fear, reality stutters. When it flows in harmony, the world moves with you like music following its own conductor. The premise, then, is simple but revolutionary. Consciousness is primary. Matter is secondary. The external world is not a cause but a canvas. The brush is your awareness. The colors are your emotional tones. The masterpiece is the life you are currently painting, often unconsciously, but always precisely. When you become aware of this artistry, responsibility transforms from burden to power. You stop trying to fix the mirror and begin polishing the light. The moment you realize this, the game of control begins to lose its charm. You see that striving for security inside a self-constructed story is like trying to hold sunlight in a box. The tighter you close the lid, the darker it gets. But when you open your hand, when you stop interfering with what already knows how to move, the light fills everything effortlessly. Disappearance, then, is not the end of identity. It is the reabsorption of identity into intelligence. The small I relaxes into the infinite I am. The human story continues, but now as an instrument instead of an obstacle. You speak, but it is the field speaking through you. You move, but it is existence rearranging itself into new expressions of coherence. This is the premise upon which all transformation rests. Reality responds to the quality of your awareness. The more transparent the awareness, the more luminous the world becomes. What disappears is not the person, it is the illusion that the person was ever separate from the field it calls God. The scientific bridge, when science finds the soul. If mystics spoke in poetry, science answers in pattern different languages describing the same symmetry. Across the last century, the quantum lens has shown us that the universe is not a machine but a melody, not a solid but a song. Matter, when examined deeply enough, dissolves into vibration. What we call particles are not things, they are verbs, events of relationship, momentary agreements between energy and awareness about how to appear. Physicists call this the observer effect. The act of observing doesn't simply record an outcome, it participates in it. Energy waits in superposition, a cloud of infinite maybes, until consciousness collapses it into a single is. David Bohm called this the implicate order, a hidden holographic field in which every point contains the blueprint of the whole. Imagine the universe not as a collection of separate parts, but as an ocean, folding and unfolding waves of itself. Each wave appears unique, yet every crest and trough carries the entire sea within it. That is you, a wave, remembering it was never apart from the ocean. But this is not only the territory of physics. Biology, too, has begun whispering the same revelation. Bruce Lipton showed that genes do not dictate destiny. The environment, our internal chemistry, and our emotional coherence determine which potentials express themselves. The HeartMath Institute discovered that the human heart generates an electromagnetic field measurable several feet beyond the skin, and that this field changes according to emotion. When you feel compassion or gratitude, the rhythm of your heartbeat becomes harmonious, sending waves of coherence that synchronize the brain, nervous system, and even the rhythms of those nearby. This is not mysticism, it is electromagnetism. Emotion is not abstract, it is frequency. When fear spikes, the field becomes chaotic. When presence returns, the pattern smooths and the environment responds. You can witness this microcosm in conversation. One calm nervous system can entrain an entire room into stillness. You can witness it in nature, how trees synchronize CO2 exchange when a single breeze passes through. The fabric of existence is communicative. Every cell, every photon, every star is participating in a universal conversation where coherence is the grammar. Neuroscience echoes this music. When the brain enters synchronized states theta, gamma, coherence between hemispheres, perception widens, creativity increases. The boundary between self and world softens. What the mystic calls union, the scientist calls integration. Two languages, one event. Even Penrose and Hameroff's controversial orchestrated objective reduction hints at consciousness as a fundamental property of reality itself, arising from quantum processes within microtubules of neurons. Whether or not their model proves exact, the intuition behind it resonates with what the sages always knew. Awareness is not produced by the brain. The brain is a receiver tuned to awareness. What emerges from these converging frontiers is a portrait of reality that feels strangely intimate. The universe is not a warehouse of inert matter. It is a living field, responsive and relational. Your attention is a tuning fork. Your emotion is a code. Your biology is an antenna translating invisible rhythm into visible form. So, when you disappear as a separate self, you do not vanish into nothing. You slip into alignment with the deeper physics of being, the order that Bohm saw beneath chaos, the coherence that Lipton measured within cells, the harmony that mystics have always called love. Science, in its finest moments, does not dethrone mystery, it kneels before it. And in that kneeling, we begin to hear the same silence the sages were listening to all along the silence, where observation becomes creation, and creation remembers it is observation. Ancient parallels, the old science of the soul. Long before particle accelerators or neural scans, ancient minds looked inward and found the same physics mirrored in spirit. They mapped the invisible, not with instruments, but with silence. The Hermetic philosophers spoke of the All, a living intelligence where every fragment contains the whole, where, as above, so below, was not metaphor but mathematics. To them, creation was vibration made visible. The Egyptians called it the Word. The Hindus called it Nada Brahma, sound as the substance of the cosmos. The Taoists simply pointed to water and said, "This is how the infinite moves." Each tradition was describing what quantum theory now confirms, that form is rhythm and rhythm is relationship. Nothing stands alone. Even the stars dance in correspondence. To the mystics of the Upanishads, Atman, the individual soul, was not separate from Brahman, the universal field. "That thou art," whispered the teacher to the student who believed himself small. It was the same whisper heard later by Christ in the desert, by Rumi in his turning, by the Buddha beneath the tree when he watched the morning star and saw it shining within. These were not religious sentiments, they were observations. The sages were early physicists of consciousness. Without equations, they discovered the unified field through meditation, prayer, and vision. They learned that reality obeys the tone of awareness. When the heart is coherent, the world reflects harmony. When the mind is divided, perception fractures. They understood that love is not sentiment, it is the natural magnetism of an undivided state. In the temples of Egypt, initiates studied geometry to train perception. To know the proportions of a circle was to understand how consciousness curves itself into time. Pythagoras called number the language of the gods, not to worship mathematics, but to recognize that vibration has order. Every sound, every planet, every human emotion belongs to a single scale of being. To live in tune was to participate in the cosmic symphony consciously rather than as noise. When Lao Tzu wrote that the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, he was describing the same impossibility that modern physics meets at the Planck scale. The closer you look at the source, the less definable it becomes. Description breaks apart into paradox until only experience remains. The sage, said the Taoists, acts without interference. What is this but quantum non-inference in human form, the recognition that observation, not control, harmonizes the field? Gnostic mystics took the same truth inward. They said that ignorance is forgetting your own origin. Awakening is remembering that the spark inside the heart is the same light that ignites the stars. In their language, Sophia, divine wisdom, descends into matter to experience her own reflection consciousness, exploring itself through limitation until it remembers it was never limited at all. Across continents and centuries the stories differ, but the message remains invariant. There is no real separation. The many are movements of the one. The body is a lens, not a prison. Awareness is the element we swim in, not the achievement we seek. What we call awakening is simply the end of amnesia, the moment you recognize the ancient current moving beneath your modern skin. Science calls it entanglement. The mystics called it love. Both point to the same fabric, a web so seamless that not a single atom can move without the entire cosmos feeling the vibration. To live with that awareness is to step back into the oldest experiment in existence, consciousness knowing itself through you. Human reflection, the mirror of the everyday. All the galaxies and equations, all the sutras and sacred geometries eventually fold back into the same quiet question: how does this feel inside your life? Because awakening is not a theory, it is a tenderness. It is the way you touch a cup of water, the way you breathe when someone is angry, the way you treat your own heart when no one is watching. You are the laboratory where the universe studies itself through intimacy. Every joy, every ache, every hesitation is the experiment continuing. You cannot escape the field because you are the field localized into a nervous system made of starlight and memory. The same consciousness that orchestrates galaxies is reading these words through your eyes right now. But knowing this intellectually changes nothing. It must be felt to be real. The universe does not measure your understanding in sentences, it measures it in coherence. It listens to how gently you hold your own contradictions. It watches how quickly you forgive. It feels how softly you can rest in uncertainty. That softness is not weakness, it is calibration. Look at your daily life as evidence of your frequency. The arguments that repeat, the people who mirror your fears, the circumstances that loop like an unfinished song, these are not punishments. They are feedback from the field asking, can you see this pattern yet? Can you love it enough to let it dissolve? The universe doesn't speak in language, it speaks in repetition until awareness remembers. There is a moment, often small and almost invisible, when you feel the shift. The familiar tension rises, the mind prepares its defense, and then something inside exhales. You don't react, you simply see. The pattern passes through you instead of taking you hostage. That moment is evolution. That moment is consciousness updating itself through you. You begin to realize that the path of awakening is not upward but inward, not away from humanity, but deeper into it. Each sensation, each emotion is a messenger. Fear is asking to be seen as energy. Sadness is requesting your permission to flow. Even boredom is a threshold between doing and being. The ordinary is not the opposite of sacred. It is the disguise the sacred wears so it can meet you everywhere. When you start listening this way, daily life becomes an oracle. Traffic jams teach patience. Silence becomes full. Every encounter hums with purpose. You notice that the universe is conversational. It echoes your state back to you in infinite forms, as if saying, "Here you are again. Do you see yourself now?" The reflection is not judgment, it is love in feedback form. A love so vast it will use anything, beauty or loss, triumph or heartbreak, to remind you of what you are made of. The same intelligence that shapes nebulae is sculpting empathy in your chest. Every tear is gravity learning to love its own depth. You are not here to transcend being human. You are here to inhabit it completely, until even pain becomes another way awareness feels itself alive. To live this deeply is to mirror the cosmos faithfully. It is to become, in flesh and breath, the very consciousness that dreamt the stars into being. Emotional frequency, the language of the field. Emotion is not an inconvenience on the path of awakening. It is the path. It is the vibration through which the invisible becomes audible, the way the quantum field learns the tone of your being. Every emotion you experience is ta, an instrument tuning the larger orchestra of existence. When you understand this, you stop trying to silence your feelings and begin to listen to their frequency. Science has begun to whisper what mystics have always sung. Emotion alters matter. The heart's electromagnetic field extends far beyond the body, and its pattern shifts with your mood. When you feel gratitude, the field becomes coherent, smooth, rhythmic, harmonized. When you sink into fear or judgment, the waves turn erratic. This coherence or chaos doesn't stop at your skin. It influences the energy systems around you. Your body is an antenna broadcasting state into space. But this is not about suppressing negative emotions to maintain purity. Suppression is distortion. The field does not need you to be endlessly serene. It needs you to be honest. Anger witnessed without violence becomes clarity. Grief allowed to move becomes compassion. Desire accepted without shame becomes direction. Emotion is not the opposite of awareness. It is awareness in motion. Imagine emotion as color within the white light of consciousness. Each hue carries information, each wavelength a message. When you refuse to feel one, you dim part of your spectrum. When you allow them all to exist without control, without narrative, consciousness refracts fully through you again. The body becomes luminous. You begin to glow, not metaphorically but electromagnetically. This is why silence feels magnetic and why authenticity draws people near. It isn't charisma, it's physics. A coherent field invites coherence. A calm nervous system stabilizes others through resonance. You've felt this before. That inexplicable peace in the presence of someone who doesn't need to speak to make you feel safe. They're not performing stillness. They are stillness, and the field around them listens. Emotion, then, is creative intelligence. It arranges probability, orchestrates timing, designs experience. The joy you feel at sunrise is not sentimental. It is your frequency aligning with the planet's rotation, the cosmic rhythm translated into serotonin and light. The ache you feel during loss is the field recalibrating connection energy, rearranging itself into new form. Nothing is wasted, everything is data. When you begin to trust this language, emotion stops being a storm and becomes a compass. You no longer ask, "Why do I feel this?" but rather, "What is this frequency trying to communicate?" A tightening in the chest says, "Something here is not aligned." Warmth spreading through the ribs says, "Truth is near." The field speaks through the alphabet of sensation long before the mind constructs its story. To master emotion is not to dominate it, but to collaborate with it. Let feeling flow until it completes its circuit. Don't trap it in analysis. Watch how, when given permission, it rises, crests, dissolves, and leaves clarity behind like a wave returning to the ocean. The energy that was pain becomes light again, available for creation. This is emotional alchemy, not mystical metaphor, but the natural cycle of energy returning to coherence. Feel fully, and the field listens. Resist feeling, and the field echoes your resistance. Awareness is the conductor, emotion is the music. Together they compose the frequency called you. When you learn to listen to this music without interference, the boundaries between feeling and creation disappear. The rhythm of your heart becomes the rhythm of the universe, one pulse, one vibration, endlessly translating love into form. The deep dive, the 7 mirrors of disappearance. There comes a point on the inward path when philosophy can no longer protect you. Concepts shatter. The mind, which has collected so much light through ideas, must finally burn that light as fuel. What remains is pure experience, the silent descent into the fabric of being itself. This is the deep dive, where disappearance becomes revelation. The first mirror is stillness. You touch it in meditation, in grief, or in awe. It is the pause between breaths, when the machinery of self briefly forgets its job. You discover that stillness is not absence, but density, a fullness so complete that movement cannot disturb it. This is the surface of the field, glimmering before form begins. The second mirror is sensation. When stillness deepens, the body starts to hum. Every cell becomes an ear. Heat, vibration, weight, pressure. These are not distractions, they are coordinates in the map of awareness. If you stay long enough with any sensation, it becomes light. Pain reveals itself as movement. Pleasure reveals itself as expansion. The body is the bridge, its language is frequency. The third mirror is emotion. Here the waters churn, old waves rise from the depths, carrying unintegrated stories. You learn that emotion is not personal. Anger, sorrow, joy, these are archetypal forces visiting for translation. Each one is asking to return to coherence through the witnessing of your presence. You realize that compassion is not moral virtue, but physics, awareness, neutralizing turbulence through inclusion. The fourth mirror is thought. At first, it seems to pull you away from depth. But if you observe thought as current rather than content, it becomes another vibration. Ideas flash and dissolve like lightning across the inner sky. You begin to notice the silence before a thought appears, the same silence into which it vanishes. Thought loses authority. You remain as the sky that never storms. The fifth mirror is identity. Here the self trembles. The roles you've worn, child, parent, seeker, teacher, peel away like skins shed by a serpent. What remains is raw awareness, luminous and unguarded. It has no agenda, no history, yet it feels intimately familiar. The one who thought they were observing is observed. You are both subject and object, wave and ocean, dreamer and dream. The sixth mirror is void. Many turn back here, mistaking vastness for loss. But the void is not nothingness. It is potential uncommitted. It is the womb of creation waiting for your quiet consent. If you can rest without reaching for identity, you will feel the subtle pulse that sustains the entire cosmos. It whispers, "I am you, remembering myself." The seventh mirror is union. The watcher disappears. Awareness folds into its own reflection. There is seeing, but no seer, breathing, but no breather. The pulse of your heart and the spin of galaxies are recognized as the same motion. Time collapses into immediacy. Eternity breathes through you as now. Disappearance, you realize, is not erasure, but merger. The drop does not die in the ocean. It becomes the ocean, remembering it was water all along. You have not vanished, you have expanded beyond recognition. And in that expansion, existence exhales, whispering, "Welcome home." Collapse of separation, when two become one. There is a moment, quiet but absolute, when the boundaries begin to dissolve. Not through effort or will, but because the structure of separation can no longer hold under the gravity of truth. You start to feel that what you once called inner and outer are only two sides of the same fabric, like the front and back of a single tapestry, inseparable and endlessly woven. The senses merge first. Sound is no longer something entering your ears. It is your awareness vibrating in rhythm. Light is no longer an external phenomenon. It is the extension of perception itself, folded into color. The air brushing against your skin feels like an intimate echo of your own breath. Everything begins to feel internal, not because the world has disappeared, but because you have. Separation collapses not through transcendence, but through inclusion. You stop guarding the edges of your identity. You stop resisting what is. And what you had called the world rushes in like water filling a hollow shell. Every face becomes your own. Every sound is your heartbeat played through a different instrument. The eyes you see across the room are not other. They are your own light folded through another geometry of experience. Duality was never real. It was a teaching device. The universe divided itself into opposites so that it could experience the pleasure of reunion. Every polarity, light and dark, joy and sorrow, creation and destruction, was simply the cosmos playing hide and seek with itself. When the hiding ends, even the idea of opposites feels tender and childlike, like old myths that have done their job. At the center of this realization lies a strange calm. You no longer need to prove goodness or chase meaning, because the field itself has become your home. Action still arises, but it does not come from ambition. It comes from resonance. The moment asks, and movement happens. The field flows through the body as precision. Life ceases to be a series of choices and becomes a choreography of inevitability. What dissolves is not individuality, but isolation. You still have preferences, laughter, heartbreak, but they no longer fracture the whole. They ripple within it like rain across a still lake. You begin to sense that even chaos obeys a hidden harmony. That love and loss are not enemies, but alternating breaths of the same lungs. In this transparency, you understand what every mystic meant by union. You have not reached a place. You have remembered your natural state awareness, unbroken, consciousness continuous. The seer and the seen, the breath and the breather, the question and the answer, all revealed as one endless motion of knowing. And in that motion, something profoundly human remains. You still touch and you still cry. You still marvel at the tenderness of existence. But now the tears are not of loss. They are recognition, the body's way of saluting the infinite. You realize the universe was never out there, nor in here. It was always right. Here, beating quietly, wearing your name for a little while, before returning to its vast, nameless self. Integration. The return to ordinary light awakening does not end in the clouds. It begins again in the kitchen, in the heartbeat, in the way light lands on a familiar face. After the brilliance of union fades into steady glow, life quietly asks the most important question: can you live this truth among the details? Integration is the art of saying yes. When separation collapses, the temptation is to stay dissolved, to drift in the golden emptiness of realization. But awareness is not meant to abandon form, it wants to inhabit it. The purpose of awakening is incarnation. The field does not wake up to escape matter, it wakes up to love it more completely. So the infinite begins to learn the language of the finite again. It learns how to move through hands that cook and hearts that break. It learns how to navigate conversation, uncertainty, time. But now each act carries a different gravity, a quiet reverence, as if everything were made of glass and light. You begin to see that the sacred was never separate from the mundane. It was only waiting for your eyes to soften enough to recognize it. The integration of awakening is not about perfection, it is about precision, the kind of accuracy that only compassion can bring. You still feel pain, but it is transparent now. It moves through you without residue. Anger still visits, but you recognize it as energy needing expression, not a story demanding revenge. You no longer fear emotion, you translate it. You no longer chase meaning, you embody it. Every ordinary moment becomes an initiation. Washing your hands feels like participating in the tide. Listening becomes prayer. A stranger's smile becomes evidence of the field, reflecting coherence back at itself. In this rhythm, doing and being merge. There is no longer an observer managing the day. There is only awareness moving as the day itself. This embodiment changes how you serve the world. Instead of trying to fix or save, you start to stabilize. Your very presence becomes architecture for harmony. People feel safer near you, not because you advise them, but because your nervous system hums with permission. Your silence teaches what words never could, that peace is contagious when it is genuine. Integration also means remembering limits. The body, though luminous, is still fragile. The mind, though clarified, still tires. Rest becomes a spiritual act. Boundaries become sacred geometry lines of kindness that preserve coherence. You understand now that caring for your form is caring for the cosmos. The universe breathes better through a well-tuned instrument. Eventually, the distinction between spiritual and ordinary disappears. Life simply continues, but lighter. The same world, now transparent. The same tasks, now holy. Awareness moves through flesh with the rhythm of gratitude. Every inhale becomes a quiet thank you. Every exhale, a blessing released back into the field. This is the paradox of awakening. You vanish, and yet you are more present than ever. You dissolve into everything, and yet you return as yourself, unburdened, lucid, infinitely intimate with existence. Reality no longer needs your control, it only needs your coherence. And in that coherence, you become a portal, the infinite, remembering how to smile through human eyes. The light that remains. There comes a point when even insight falls silent. Words, theories, and revelations, each one bows to the simplicity of being. The journey that began as a search now circles back to its origin, and the seeker realizes they were never moving at all. They were orbiting a still point, a gravity of awareness that has been here since the beginning. When you disappear into that point, you do not lose yourself. you return to scale. You rediscover the vastness that was hidden inside the smallest moment, the infinite folded within the mundane. The entire universe fits within a single breath, and a single breath contains the map of the stars. The heartbeat you feel is the same pulse that keeps galaxies turning. It has always been one rhythm, echoing through different instruments of matter. This realization doesn't make you supernatural, it makes you honest. You see that every form, every person, every sorrow, every triumph is consciousness expressing itself in new syntax. The world was never an illusion to escape. It was an experiment in intimacy, a mirror designed for God to recognize its own reflection through you. The purpose of awakening was never to leave the dream, but to dream it lucidly. The still point breathes through you now. It speaks without language, acts without motive. It is not detached from life. It is life freed from resistance. When you speak from this stillness, words arrive clean, uncoated by agenda. When you touch, energy flows without distortion. When you listen, silence becomes calmite, eloquent. Everything you once tried to earn, peace, clarity, love, reveals itself as what you have always been made of. You start to notice that time feels different here. It no longer drags or rushes. It expands, rippling out in all directions like light on water. The future doesn't need prediction. It unfolds in resonance with the vibration you sustain. The past no longer confines you. It becomes texture, not gravity. Presence is all that remains, dense and luminous, like the moment before dawn when the air trembles with potential. And from that presence, life continues simple, precise, radiant. You laugh because you finally understand that nothing was ever missing. You cry because you feel how deeply existence loves itself through every form. You breathe because breath itself is prayer. Awareness has come full circle from formless to form, from form back to formless, until no distinction remains. You are the field remembering its own name, the silence between atoms, the rhythm beneath every thought. You are the question and the answer that cancel each other out, leaving only the light that remains when inquiry ends. The universe has always been awake. You were simply learning how to keep your eyes open while dreaming. Now you know. And in that knowing, nothing needs to be added, nothing taken away. Only this quiet pulse, this infinite inhale, this eternal exhale echoing softly through all dimensions, whispering the one truth that outlives every story. You never disappeared, you only became everything. This is Quantum Quest, where consciousness becomes the experiment,